We are still a go.
How long till drop?
On schedule, Commander. 5 minutes to live fire.
Hello and welcome back to yet another marvelous video. Today we've got something in store for all the G.I. Joe fans out there. We're going to take a look at the character who's the fanatical leader of a terrorist organization in this universe and kind of wants to take over the world completely. I'm sure you've guessed who we're talking about by now, but it's none other than the franchise's main antagonist, Cobra Commander. So join us as we dive into a video discussing his entire life. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we do have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
All we've been missing is our commander.
Who is Cobra Commander? There are many versions of this character thanks to all the different continuities that the series has had, like the Marvel Comics version, the Sunbow cartoon, IDW comics, and so on. Many of these versions have given different backstories to the character, and before we dive into it, let's just take a general look at who he is. The Cobra Commander is not just some random masked villain who goes around shouting orders. He's the leader of Cobra, and he's very ruthless. The kind of guy who deliberately causes both social and political issues all over the world and is constantly going head-to-head with the G.I. Joe team. He has a huge army that he's gathered by getting a hold of people who have been displaced. He offers them money and power in exchange, and along with that, he gives them a shot at getting back at a world that has wronged them. But there is one catch to all this. In return for what he gives them, he expects an unwavering loyalty from them to his cause. Like most villains, his ultimate goal is world domination because, of course, what else would it be? Marvel Comics, the used car salesman. We don't know much about his past before he became Cobra Commander. All we know is that he was just an average man from the middle class trying to make a living. He started out as a salesman for used cars, then moved on to being a businessman, but success always seemed to be just out of reach, no matter how hard he worked. Soon, his life kind of started spiraling when his debt kept piling up. On top of all of this, his older brother Dan died as well. Dan was a soldier who fought in the Vietnam War, and he always kept re-enlisting to make sure his younger brother would not be drafted like him. But when Dan came back home from the war, he wasn't the same. All those years of going off to war left him deeply scarred, so he opened a halfway house specifically for veterans who were struggling with the fallout of war, broken marriages, unemployment, and bankruptcy. But the halfway house soon faced trouble. This venture of his was where he put all of his money, and when it started to fail, the bank came in and was on the verge of taking his assets. But before they could, another vet ended up accidentally burning the building down, and Dan was blamed. The bank ended up suing him. A jury decided that he wasn't guilty, but this didn't matter to the judge, who ended up overturning the verdict, thinking that he was just another bitter veteran. This completely ruined Dan, and because of this, he turned to alcoholism to cope with everything. He also started acting very, very recklessly, driving too fast and too dangerously, almost like he wanted to die. And that's exactly what happened. One day, when he was drunk, he ended up crashing into another car, killing himself and the people in that other car. This other car had Snake Eyes' sister, Terry, and his parents were going to meet him at the airport. He was coming back from Vietnam as well. Life after Dan. Vigilantism. Dan's death was something that the Cobra Commander couldn't handle, so he got into vigilantism. He really wanted someone to pay for his brother's death, and he channeled that into punishing criminals by taking away the money that they earned in illicit ways. He then found Snake Eyes, and he was spending a great deal of his time drunk after the death of his family. He convinced him to go with him on a vigilante mission across the country, but he never told him the real reason for his obsession or how he was connected to the accident. Soon, his focus shifted. It wasn't just about punishing criminals anymore, it was about accumulating wealth. He used it to buy other people's loyalty, and Snake Eyes soon grew wary. One night, they broke into Judge Mitchell Tate's house. Snake Eyes had no idea why they were there, but Cobra Commander told him that Tate was the judge responsible for destroying his brother's life. Tate's ruling led to the car accident. He gave a gun to Snake Eyes and asked him to kill Tate. When Snake Eyes said no to this and pointed the gun at Cobra Commander instead, he found out that it wasn't loaded. Cobra Commander didn't actually believe that Snake Eyes would follow through and kill the judge, so he did it himself. Snake Eyes left after this, hoping to never see Cobra Commander again. Cobra Commander was definitely not happy about this. He now looked at Snake Eyes as a problem. He tracked him down to Japan, where Snake Eyes had found peace with Storm Shadow's ninja clan. He drained all of his savings and hired a mercenary, Firefly, to get rid of Snake Eyes. Firefly wasn't up for this task and pointed him to Zartan, an assassin. Zartan infiltrated the ninja clan with Firefly's help and used an arrow that he stole to shoot Snake Eyes. The arrow didn't kill Snake Eyes. It killed the Hard Master, Storm Shadow's uncle, and the leader of the clan. In an instant, everything changed. Storm Shadow ended up being blamed for this and had to flee from his family. He now wanted revenge. Snake Eyes, on the other hand, lost his new family as well. Pretty tragic, right? Then, when Cobra Commander's wife found out about what her husband had become, she confronted him about it, which made him leave with his son, Billy. Creation of Cobra! Cobra Commander's descent into madness kinda started here. He drove to America with his son, and he blamed all his problems on things like the government and the big companies that wanted to keep little guys like him down. He decided that if the system was against people who were like him, he'd create a new one. So, he hit the road, moving from town to town, hopping from one place to the next and looking for people who were like him. He involved these people in pyramid schemes and other shady cons like selling products, magazines, and the like. Billy was also with him throughout all of this. He became their leader. Cobra Commander became a leader. The first time in his life he felt successful. He was finally in control and his power inflated his ego a lot. Then, he came across a town that looked perfect for him, and it was called Springfield. It had once been a thriving place, but the businesses here weren't doing great and the people were disillusioned. He was basically their savior, and the seed for something much larger in that small town was planted. He started an organization soon after, and its goal? Well, that was to wrap all around the world, just like a huge cobra, in order to control it. Cobra Commander's influence spread quickly, and he used both terror and extortion to get more power. By now, he had fully turned into a completely crazy man and had absolutely no morality. He didn't even care when Billy went off into Springfield's underground, which was anti-Cobra. Soon, Cobra was no longer just a local operation, it became international, spreading throughout the world. It used terrorism to destabilize governments. And Cobra Commander? Well, he was right there, at the top of it all, believing that he was invincible. The War Against G.I. Joe. One of the earliest missions for the Joe team was an operation to rescue an ambassador in the Middle East from Cobra agents. But that was just the beginning. Cobra's reach quickly expanded, and the small South American country Sierra Gordo became one of its earliest victims. As time went on, G.I. Joe went from being an anti-terrorist group to a dedicated force that fought against Cobra. The two became enemies and were locked in a constant struggle against each other. The Joes worked really hard to stop Cobra Commander's plans, whether it was assassinating foreign ambassadors or subverting the US government. Cobra didn't just go after America, though. They used the Cold War's chaos to their advantage. They fought not only the Joes, but also the Soviets' October Guard as well. Despite the pressure from G.I. Joe and other forces, Cobra Commander held on to his power. He was dangerous, yes, he kept his cool, always appearing confident and calm. His authority remained unquestioned. Power struggles. All of this didn't last for long, though, and as Cobra grew, he needed more people to take control of the organization. That's when Destro, a Scottish arms dealer, was brought in. Destro turned out to be far more brilliant and capable than expected. When Cobra discovered that Destro and his lieutenant, the Baroness, used to be in a relationship, his paranoia was at an all-time high. He got Major Sebastian Blood to get rid of Destro, but the plan failed, and there were power struggles within Cobra. Cobra Commander's calm exterior started to crack, revealing the madness that was bubbling beneath. The battle with the Joes went on, and the commander hired Storm Shadow to be his bodyguard. Storm Shadow had his own reasons for joining Cobra. He wanted to get revenge for his uncle's murder. His death had something to do with Cobra. Commander knew exactly who Storm Shadow was, but kept that knowledge to himself. Storm Shadow was loyal and even rescued Cobra Commander when the Joes captured him. The power struggles within Cobra went on. The Baroness was keen to take over, but Destro didn't support her plan. Even though he didn't like Cobra Commander, Destro was loyal and refused to betray him. Then, with the help of Blood, the Baroness hired a boy from the anti-Cobra underground to kill the commander. That boy was none other than Billy. Billy was captured before he could complete the mission, and Cobra Commander didn't show him any mercy. During his interrogation, Billy never revealed the names of those who helped him with the plan. Moved by this, Storm Shadow freed him, and the two left for New York. There, Billy trained in ninjutsu under Storm Shadow. Eventually, Billy left to confront the commander. When he came back to Springfield, he became caught up in a fight. A missile struck Billy's car, which left him in a coma and caused him to lose a leg and an eye. The commander did not care for his son again. He was more focused on his plans. He came up with a plan to trick the G.I. Joe team into provoking a fault line, which triggered massive earthquakes in Mexico. This caused a new island to rise from the ocean, and Cobra quickly took control, holding the island against the G.I. Joe team until Cobra's lawyers got it recognized as an independent nation. After this, Cobra Island now had the perks of sovereignty, including 3 whole miles of ocean and its very own airspace. But of course, G.I. Joe wasn't about to let Cobra get away with this. The G.I. Joe team then sent a Sky Striker jet to spy on the island with Ripcord on. Ripcord ejected after hearing that his girlfriend, Candy, who had been missing for a while, might be on the island. But Candy died in the same car crash that almost killed Billy. On Cobra Island, Ripcord and Zartan fought against each other, while Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow also came to the island to get revenge for their teacher, the Soft Master, who Zartan had killed. While all of this was happening, Zartan badly hurt Ripcord and took his place, pretending to be Ripcord when a team of Joes came to rescue him. Storm Shadow confronted Cobra Commander, demanding to know if he ordered the Soft Master's murder, but he lied, claiming that Zartan did it because he wanted to prove that he could. Soon, the Baroness shot and killed Storm Shadow while he was fighting his way out with Snake Eyes. Creating Serpentor! After things got a little better, Cobra Commander decided to let Dr. Mindbender start an insane project. It was to create the ultimate soldier by putting together the DNA of history's greatest warriors. Sounds wild, right? Well, Cobra tracked down the remains of great figures like Julius Caesar, Napoleon, Hannibal, Attila the Hun, and many more. In Springfield, Mindbender used a cloned body and mixed it with the DNA of these famous soldiers, plus the body of Storm Shadow, who was brought back to life in the process. The result? That was Serpentor, a combination of history's greatest minds. Just as it was about to be done, thanks to Ripcord, who was undercover, the Joes figured out the location of Springfield. Cobra Commander ordered the evacuation of the town by Destro, and Serpentor was tasked with leading the troops to fight the Joes and letting the people escape. Because of this, the troops started to like Serpentor, and Cobra Commander didn't like this, so he tried to assassinate him. The pit, which was the headquarters of G.I. Joe, was closed after the evacuation, and the Joes were going through an investigation. Cobra Commander and Serpentor teamed up to wreak havoc on the pit. Cobra Commander was very desperate to earn back the respect of his soldiers, so he led them himself with Destro. General Hawk and a few others were the only ones left to defend the headquarters. When the commander saw Hawk in the pit, he wanted to take him down personally. But the Joes weren't done yet. Generals Hollingsworth and Hawk managed to escape and then detonate the pit, which collapsed on Cobra Commander and Destro. Everyone believed they both died in this explosion, but what actually happened was that the two were stuck in the pit. They managed to escape and find their way to an abandoned shopping mall. They stole a car and tried to get back to Springfield. Along the way, a man pulled them over. When he saw Cobra Commander's name on his license, he told them that Billy, his son, remained comatose after his injuries from escaping Springfield. Destro left him alone with Billy, and he promised to be a better father. Serpentor took over Cobra fully, and they turned into arms dealers and started selling terror drones. The fall of Cobra Commander. Cobra Commander took Billy to a Crimson Guardsman who was undercover named Fred 7. Now, Fred wasn't just any Cobra operative. He designed advanced prototype weapons for Cobra. The commander had only one request, and that was to build Billy a leg. Fred did that, but it wasn't all he did. He made a new suit of armor for Cobra Commander, who tested it out. Cobra Commander wanted to go back and take down G.I. Joe, but Billy wanted nothing to do with that, so he left. The commander, who now wanted to act as a good father, planned on giving up Cobra. If this all went according to their plans, things would have been completely different, but that's not what happened. Fred wasn't too keen on this plan. After all, he had given his entire life to Cobra. He couldn't just let them walk away. So he took out his gun and shot Cobra Commander, picked up his armor and put it on himself. With Raptor, he buried the body and went to Cobra Island, where he claimed that he was the real Cobra Commander. The Baroness figured out who he was after he took off his helmet, but instead of revealing it, she went along with it, eager to rule over Cobra. His revival and return. What Fred 7 didn't know was that Fred 8, another Crimson Guardman, was watching all of this happen. He took the body out and found out that the commander was still alive. Soon after, Fred 8 revived him, and the commander called up his Crimson Guardsmen, the ones that were still loyal, and started another venture like Cobra. The new one was very successful, and nobody from Cobra knew what actually happened to him for quite some time. After a while, Raptor ended up telling Dr. Mindbender about what actually happened. He was all for using the commander's DNA to make a new person to lead them. So he went to Cobra Commander's grave and, to his surprise, found it empty. This is when the commander revealed that he wasn't dead. He came back to Cobra with his guardsmen to take it all back. He locked all his enemies up in a freighter, planning to kill them. Billy, Mindbender, and Raptor were also inside. He proclaimed that his plan to leave all of this behind wasn't a good one, and he ended up disowning Billy. He used a lot of explosives to bury the freighter beneath the island's volcano under the rubble. Cobra Commander wasn't done yet, though. After taking back control of Cobra, he came up with another twisted plan: take control of Millville, a small town. This wasn't a military invasion, it was psychological warfare. He brainwashed the entire population, turning them into mindless workers, and basically made another Springfield but bigger. Then, Cobra backed the Emir of Benzine in the Middle East in a brutal war. Because of this, many of the Joes lost their lives, but Cobra Commander was still not satisfied. His next move? An attack on Destro's castle, located in Scotland, simply because he wanted to show him his place. But just before he went ahead with this, he found out that Zartan and Billy had both escaped from the rubble. Not only that, they actually helped Destro, and later, they even teamed up with the Joes to save the Baroness. Even though a lot of his plans failed, he was super relentless. Over the years, he kept Cobra active, attacking Destro's new castle, fighting the G.I. Joe team in Millville, and launching an assault on the G.I. Joe headquarters in Utah. Then, in 1994, he made his way to Borovia, which was formerly a Soviet nation. There, he backed Metz, the new president, and executed 2 freedom fighters himself. The White Clown and Magda were both allies of the Joes. And here's where things get dark. He used the brainwave scanner and brainwashed Destro, Storm Shadow, Zartan, the Baroness, and Billy too. These were people who walked away from Cobra, but under his control, they were all forced to come back. G.I. Joe tried to intervene, but their rescue attempt failed. The U.S. military, seeing no way forward, officially put an end to the Joe team. It looked like Cobra Commander finally won, but that wasn't the case. Soon, the Cobra troops in Europe were wiped out in a coordinated attack. The Cobra Commander was declared as an international fugitive. He went off the grid for years, but Cobra activity was up all over the world. He was rebuilding things and called a meeting with the Dreadnoks, a biker gang, and revealed his latest weapon, nanomites. Now, these were machines that could be used to infect both the human body and computers, but before he could go through with his plans, Destro showed up and took over Cobra by force. He also used the nanomites on the commander, which left him in a barely coherent state. With Destro now in command, Cobra forces and his personal Iron Grenadiers fought with a reinstated G.I. Joe team in Washington, D.C., who were trying to stop the nanomites from being used. Just when it seemed like everything was over for the commander, Storm Shadow showed up to break him out of his cell. He went with his forces to take back power and kill Destro, revealed that his son Alexander did all this. To make up for this, he offered to return to Cobra as long as the commander needed it. Serpentor returns! Now that Cobra Commander was back in power, of course, he went back to fight with the Joes, and this time, he snuck a nuclear device into the country. He also sent Storm Shadow to assassinate General Hawk. Storm Shadow was still under the influence of the brainwave scanner and almost broke free from it, but the commander ended up putting him through it again before Snake Eyes and Billy could help him. Cobra Commander escaped Snake Eyes and Billy with the help of a newly brainwashed Storm Shadow after shooting Billy, but on the way back, he was kidnapped. When he was brought back to Cobra Island, he discovered that Serpentor, who old Cobra members had revived, was behind this, and he was doing it all with the help of Dr. Mindbend. And this wasn't just some small-scale rebellion. Serpentor's new army, the Coil, had been attacking major cities worldwide. The commander was locked up, and he wasn't about to stay that way. With help from some captured Joes, he got free and sent a message to Destro. A full-blown war started on Cobra Island. The Joes, Destro's forces, Cobra loyalists, and even the Dreadnoks all invaded the island. The commander and Serpentor II faced off against each other. The commander was no match for Serpentor, who demanded that he take off his helmet. The commander handed it over. It exploded in Serpentor's hands, leaving him dazed. He taunted Serpentor, claiming that he was engineered with a lot of potential, but he still lacked the commander's DNA. With that, Cobra Commander kicked him off the launch pad into the waters below. It's surprising how this guy just keeps coming back over and over, no matter how many people try to take him down. Cobra Commander in custody, or is he? After the chaos on Cobra Island, Cobra Commander vanished. He went deep into hiding with Storm Shadow at a secret Red Ninja retreat in Tibet. He was hoping to recruit them for Cobra, but before he could do so, the Joes showed up, which forced him into another narrow escape. Eventually, he went back to take control of Cobra from Destro. Destro was more than happy to hand over command and return to Scotland. His debt to the commander was finally paid. With Tomax and Zammot working behind the scenes, Cobra took back Cobra Island. Cobra Commander was ready to come up with more plans to take over the world. But then, the Joes captured Destro in Sierra Gordo, and just when the commander thought he was gone for good, Destro made a deal. Instead of facing trial at the UN, he offered to keep certain governments' dirty secrets under wraps in exchange for helping them capture Cobra Commander. The commander was baited. He was told that Destro was on a train that the Joes were guarding. He also believed that the Baroness was on his side. The truth was that Destro was released way before he attacked the train. The Baroness then ended up shooting him and he was taken into custody. Wait, it's still not over yet. The guy who got arrested wasn't actually Cobra Commander at all. It was Zartan pretending to be him. The commander somehow figured out something was wrong and he switched places with Zartan. He eventually got Zartan out of custody and they went back to Cobra Island, where Destro was running things now. Cobra Commander's escape. Destro never saw him coming. He didn't know that a few people were still loyal to the commander all this time, and that they had helped him enter the island. The Baroness was now pregnant, so he tried to send her away on a plane, but the Commander didn't let her escape. She was killed when he launched a missile at the aircraft. Now that he had the situation under control, the Commander focused all of his efforts on a new weapon called the Tempest. This device, which was made with the help of Dr. Mindbender, could manipulate the clouds and make them rain, but this wasn't just any rain. The Tempest was specifically designed to release the Death Angel virus, an airborne plague that could consume flesh in minutes. After a test of this weapon, the government decided the Cobra must be dealt with once and for all, so it planned to drop a nuclear bomb on the island. A corrupt general told the Cobra Commander about these plans, and he thought he would use this bomb to get revenge on his enemies. He took off from the island with his loyal soldiers and a few prisoners like Destro. The only ones left behind? The members of Coil who had sided with Destro. The Commander sent them one final message just before leaving, mocking them for their betrayal. Then, just as his aircraft lifted off, the Joes dropped the bomb, destroying Cobra Island. With the island wiped off the map, Cobra needed a new base of operations. Commander set that up in the European nation of Badakhstan, preparing to launch the Tempest into orbit through satellite. But once Mindbender finished prepping the weapon, Commander shot him. Before the Tempest could be activated, G.I. Joe launched an attack. The battle was brutal, but in the end, the Joes destroyed the Tempest with some last-minute help from Dr. Mindbender, which was his final act before bleeding to death. Cobra Commander, of course, escaped once again with Tomax and Zamon. They fled to a cave deep in Badakhstan, only to be confronted by a new enemy, Dila Eden from the Red Shadows. This organization had one goal, and that was getting rid of both G.I. Joe and Cobra to take control of the world for themselves. Rebuilding Cobra. After his run-in with the Red Shadows, Cobra Commander simply vanished. No one knew if he was dead, captured, or alive, but Hawk wasn't about to let him get away. He sent Spirit on a secret mission to track him down, and Spirit did this for months, following rumors that eventually led him to South America. There, he heard the locals talking about the Blue Ghost, a figure who had something to do with the disappearance of criminals. Spirit knew exactly who this was. His search then took him to a secluded cabin where he found the Cobra Commander just sitting there, waiting, a gun in his hand. Before he could react, the Commander had him captured and locked away in his cell. He was preparing for his next plan. The Joes had no idea what was happening behind the scenes for nearly a year. Somehow, the Cobra Commander managed to infiltrate the US government. Using advanced tech borrowed from Zartan, he assassinated the White House Chief of Staff, took his place. Now that he was disguised as one of the president's most trusted advisors, the Commander had access to top-secret information. He worked to dismantle the Joes from inside the system, convincing the president they were unnecessary and even dangerous. Instead, he proposed a new elite unit, Phoenix Guard. The team looked like an elite strike force, and it was led by General Philip Ray, but there was one problem. Ray had absolutely no idea that his entire squad was made up of undercover Cobra operatives. Their mission? Well, that was to destroy G.I. Joe from the inside. The Joe's new headquarters was invaded by the Phoenix Guard, which ended up causing a lot of destruction and killing many people. Ray wanted as few casualties as possible. He still believed that the Joes had gone rogue, but his team had other plans. It wasn't until deep into the battle that he finally realized the truth, that his soldiers weren't US operatives, they were members of Cobra. After he realized this, he turned against them and started fighting with the Joes. The Joes' commander, General Colton, called the president to get answers, but the president was just as blindsided. He had no idea this attack was even happening. That's when they found the real Friedland. His dead body was rotting in his office. And then, Cobra Commander made his grand reveal. His face appeared on a nearby monitor smirking. He told the president the truth. He had all of their secrets now, every classified document and weakness. The commander was already preparing his next move at his hidden base. Cobra sleeper cells were waiting for his signal. They were all preparing for a new war that was about to begin. He had one more thing that no one else knew about, and that was a baby. The Baroness's baby, to be specific, was now under the care of Cobra doctors. We don't know how he got a hold of the baby or if the Baroness is still alive. What else does he have in store for the world? That remains a mystery.
Then attack now before they're ready for us.
The Sunbow cartoon version. In the Sunbow cartoon, the commander is introduced as the leader of Cobra. He's always shown with his face covered, and it's done so usually with a hood that has holes cut out for eyes or with a chrome mask that's featureless. His voice is very distinctive, both shrill and raspy, and he's voiced by Chris Latta. The writers of this show basically admitted that they figured out how to write his character when they finally stopped looking at him as a Hitler-like character and started looking at him more along the lines of Yosemite Sam. Just like his comic book version, this one also loves coming up with a variety of schemes for world domination. Some of these even include cloning dinosaurs, hiding away mini Cobra troops inside Christmas gifts, and even using a laser to carve out his face on the moon. When they try to create Serpentor in the show, He is intended to be the commander's successor, so he keeps interfering with their plans to create him. He does so at first by contaminating the DNA samples they get with a mutated virus. This basically ends up creating a monster instead. He tries the second time too, but his plans aren't successful, and Serpentor ends up making him a lackey instead. After he saves his forces following an attack on Washington, he convinces Serpentor that he needs to be kept around in case they need a scapegoat. From then on, he's used as the primary commander for Cobra on the field, and Serpentor leads Cobra from the terror dome. His backstory in the show is that he's just a guy who led a mutiny at his military academy. There were plans for a third season for this show following the movie, but it never ended up happening. The idea was that Coil would show up and that Tomax and Xamot would lead it, and they would become the Joe's main enemy. Commander was supposed to be a figure behind the scenes who would play both sides secretly. He was supposed to be manipulating both Coil and the Joes, and he was supposed to show himself in his mutated form in the second half of this season. G.I. Joe the Movie. G.I. Joe the Movie finally gives us a full-on origin story for Cobra Commander, but it completely contradicts what we already knew about him from the animated series. According to the film, Cobra Commander is not just some megalomaniacal terrorist. No, he's actually a scientist and a nobleman from an ancient pre-human society called Cobra Law, which was hidden away in the Himalayas. But here's where things get weird. Even though he looked human, he was blue-skinned, bald, and had creepy snake eyes. He wasn't exactly like the rest of us. Now, how exactly did he end up this way? One day, during a lab accident, he was blasted by these volatile spores that ended up mutating his face, giving him 8 extra eyes. This is why he's always wearing a mask. Cobra Law's ruler, Globulus, believed that he had potential, so instead of banishing him, Globulus sent Cobra Commander out into the world to build an army that would wipe out human civilization and make way for Cobra Law's grand return. And that army, you guessed it, was called Cobra. The movie completely rewrites his backstory, but it doesn't stop there. Because Cobra Commander fails like he usually does and Cobra Law is done with him, Globulus decides it's time for some good old-fashioned punishment and holds a kangaroo court to put him on trial. And his sentence? Well, it's more exposure to those nasty spores that mutated him in the first place. Only this time, instead of just messing up his face, they start literally turning him into a snake. He manages to escape with Roadblock, one of the Joes, but as the spores keep working, his mind and body start slipping away. He also actually ends up saving the day in this movie. During the final battle, just as Cobra Law is being destroyed, he accidentally stops Serpentor from taking out Lieutenant Falcon. This actually gives the Joes the opening that they were looking for to destroy Cobra Law for good. And that is the last we see of Cobra Commander in the movie. There are no dramatic comebacks, no evil master plans, just a Cobra Commander who is now fully transformed into a snake. The Deke cartoon. The Deke series was a continuation of the Sunbow series, but it didn't follow the ideas that they had in mind for the third season. It was also titled G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, and it lasted for 2 seasons. It picks up after the events of the film. Cobra has basically been struggling through this time. All the important figures like Storm Shadow, Dr. Mindbender, Tomax, Xamot, and Zartan have abandoned the organization, and the rest of them have gotten tired of Serpentor. Because of this, the Baroness brings Cobra Commander back in a more human form. After he's transformed, he takes over Cobra once again. He goes back to fighting with the Joes, and there now is a new generation that Sergeant Hawk and Slaughter are leading. The Commander's main lackeys in this series are Nagahide, who's a poacher, and Metalhead. IDW Comics. In IDW's G.I. Joe series, Cobra Commander isn't just one guy, it's a title. Over the years, multiple people have held the position, each chosen by a secretive ruling body called the Cobra Council. The first Cobra Commander in this continuity was a powerful businessman who led Cobra from the shadows. He ditched the traditional military-style helmet in favor of a suit and tie and a sleek silver mask with fanged engravings around the jawline. Unlike past versions, this commander was a behind-the-scenes manipulator. High-ranking Cobra operatives like Tomax, Xamot, and the Baroness were among the few who actually knew of his existence. This version is also way more introspective and also kind of passive-aggressive. After Chuckles, a G.I. Joe spy, is captured, instead of killing the guy, he ends up trying to recruit him into Cobra, offering him revenge on Xamot. However, things take a turn when the commander ends up being killed. Soon, there's a competition in the group about who gets to take over as his replacement, and this ends up being directed by the Cobra Council. It turns into something else. Whoever kills the most Joes wins it. Some of the contenders are Major Blood, Tomax, Craig and the Baroness. The Baroness, however, doesn't believe she will be chosen simply because she's a woman, but this doesn't stop her from killing. In the end, Craig ends up winning. He plays the game very smartly. He secretly replaces his rival with Zartan and doubles his kill score. This shows that he's willing to break the rules to win. Craig was born in Southeast Asia's Golden Triangle, raised as a child laborer and then a child soldier. Major Blood gave him his codename after testing his ruthlessness. After Craig was told there was a spy in his gang, he responded by killing every single member just to be sure. After this, he was invited to join Cobra, and he finally did so after some hesitance. As the new Cobra Commander, Craig wasted absolutely no time in making his presence known. His first move was to launch a full-scale invasion on the nation of Nanzhao. He does that so that he can destroy its heroin field strategically and not just for the gold reserves. On the surface, it looked like Cobra was taking down a regime and fighting the drug trade, but in reality, it was a calculated move to drive up the price of heroin, which Cobra was already profiting from. Then, Craig wiped out the entire Cobra Council just to make sure there were no loose ends, cementing himself as the ruler of Cobra. Under his leadership, Cobra then transformed into a global military power. Craig wanted to be feared. He didn't just want to control the world, he wanted everyone to know he was doing it. Now, there was another character in G.I. Joe Origins, a psychotic ex-stockbroker known as the Chimera, who slaughtered his own family and law enforcement officers after his crimes were exposed. Originally, writer Larry Hama planned for this guy to be the Cobra Commander, but once the whole Cobra Council storyline was introduced, this idea was scrapped.
You will call me Commander.
G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, and G.I. Joe Retaliation. In the live-action movie G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, Cobra Commander is played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. For most of G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, he is known simply as the Doctor, a brilliant but completely unhinged scientist working with James McCullen on the development of nanomite technology for military use. But as the story unfolds, we learn that he's actually Rexford Rex Lewis, younger brother of Anna Lewis, aka the Baroness, and a former military science officer who once fought with Duke, his friend and mentor. A few years ago, during a mission in East Africa, Duke and his team launched a premature airstrike, unknowingly leaving Rex behind to die. But moments before the explosion, Rex stumbled upon Dr. Mindbender conducting secret experiments with nanomites. Rex survived, but at a cost. The blast left him scarred and dependent on a breathing mask. Under Mindbender's guidance, he mastered the nanomites. He used his own sister as his first major test subject, brainwashing her into becoming the Baroness, one of Cobra's deadliest operatives. Now holding a deep grudge against Duke, Rex finally gets his moment of revenge when Duke is captured. He reveals himself and attempts to inject Duke with nanomites, but in a shocking turn, the Baroness breaks free from her programming and saves Duke instead. Realizing he's lost, Rex flees, taking a badly burned McCullen with him. As they escape, Rex uses a specialized strain of nanomites to heal McCullen's wounds, but there's a catch. The nanomites encase McCullen's entire face in a living metallic substance. With sadistic satisfaction, Rex names him Destro, and he wears a new breathing mask, officially declaring himself the Cobra Commander. Even though he's caught and thrown into a high-security prison on the USS Flag, his plan is far from being over. With Zartan disguised as the President of the United States, Cobra's influence is already growing. When he returns in G.I. Joe Retaliation, he looks completely different. He shows up with a new design that's much closer to his classic look from the cartoon. The character is played by Luke Bracey and is voiced by Robert Baker. The director of this film initially suggested that Gordon-Levitt's Commander and this one might not be the same, but it was confirmed later that it is Ray Lewis. He just has a new look now. At the beginning of the film, Cobra Commander is being held in a maximum security prison in Germany, floating in a suspended water chamber, while being force-fed a paralyzing drug to keep him from escaping. But of course that doesn't last long. Firefly and Storm Shadow get him out of there, but they end up leaving Destro behind. Storm Shadow is injured after the events of the escape, so he's sent off to recover in the Himalayas, while the commander goes off to his secret headquarters. There, he meets with Zartan, who's still disguised as the president, and unveils Project Zeus, a superweapon designed to unleash kinetic bombardment on major cities around the world. Cobra Commander completely annihilates London to demonstrate the power of this weapon, wiping a whole city off the map in an instant. But before he can finish the job and unleash Zeus fully, the Joes end up intervening, and they take down Cobra's operation. Both Zartan and Firefly are killed in the battle. Cobra Commander manages to escape. Marvelous verdict! With that, we've come to the end of yet another marvelous video. The life of Cobra Commander has surely been an interesting one to take a peek at. The guy has come up with way too many schemes to take over the world, and has also consistently escaped from the Joes so many times. What about this character do you guys really like? Are there any specific schemes of his that you're fond of? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and if you enjoyed watching this video, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.